There you go, and welcome to Let's Talk. I'm John Kane. I'm the host, sitting in by myself. I've got to tell you, as I mentioned on the last show, Shawnee Rice, who has been with me for over almost 2 years, is kind of moving on. She was going to be here today, and we're going to kind of do her swan song show today. But she fell ill, so she wasn't able to join us today. Maybe we'll get her in one more time. So I know, I'm sure that callers would love to, offer their comments to her directly, and we'll see if we can get her in here. I am pulling in a few folks that are going to sit in with me as we go forward. Just not today. Just today. Today you got me, and we're going to address some issues. As I put the promo out there, I said we're going to talk about racism in the age of Trump. And I say this because racism has always been here. And look, we can argue that we started seeing a real uptick in the racial divide because Obama got elected. Just the reaction, the knee-jerk reaction that so many people had to a black president was, I mean, you could taste it. I mean, it was pretty strong. And of course, that knee-jerk reaction gives you a Donald Trump. But I got to tell you, I have never been told more times in the last week than in the last week to leave the country. Go back to where you come from. Of course, that's kind of absurd, telling a native person to go back where they come from. But you know what happens is, a lot of this plays out on Facebook. So they'll look at my Facebook and they see that my people, my family lives on a native territory that's on the Canadian side, which we didn't put that line there. I call it the imaginary line between that cuts through our territory. So of course, white folk got to jump in and say, "Oh, why don't you go back to Canada?" And so that's one of the immediate reactions we get. And of course, if you offer any criticism to Donald Trump and already criticism to the United States, it automatically assumes, that you got to be a libtard. You've got to be a Hillary Clinton supporter. And if you listen to my show, you know that I got problems on both sides of that aisle. I will say that racism has become, and always has been, a bit of a hallmark for the Republican Party. I know people say, yeah, but Lincoln, he freed the slaves. Yeah, in the South he did, strategically. And he also executed 38 Dakota on the day after Christmas, a week before he did the Emancipation Proclamation. So don't give me the whole Abraham Lincoln is proof that Republicans aren't racist. Racism is a hallmark of the Republican character. And here's an example of, I can give a real specific example. Just the other day, a town in Connecticut, Killingly, Connecticut, they are the only school, their Board of Education, it's the first time in history that, or certainly modern history, that a school removed their racist native mascot and then put it back. Yeah, so what happened was they voted to get rid of calling themselves the Redmen with all of these, these typical native logos and images and that kind of stuff, stereotypical stuff, pan-Indian stuff. They voted to get rid of it. And so a bunch of Republicans decide they're going to run for the school board, enough to tip the scales the other way. So a few Republicans, get elected on the school board, and they ran literally on a platform to get the racist mascot back. I mean, forget about all the other education stuff. Nah, that's not important. We're running on a racist mascot platform. They got elected, and they switched it back. Now, this has been attempted other places. Trust me, back home when we battled the school in Lancaster, New York, because they were called the Redskins. That school board voted unanimously to get rid of it, and so they only had 2 board seats come up at a time, and 2 staunch R-word, red slur advocates got voted on there, but that was enough to tip the scales. They couldn't do it twice, so but that's what their attempt was. No, they were going to run all these right-wing Fox News, white as can be, white as white folks onto the school board so they could switch it back. But this just happened, and this is Killingly, Connecticut. This isn't like the Midwest, this isn't the South. This is Connecticut. So just to put things in a little bit of perspective. I mean, everybody thinks that, oh, New England is so woke. Yeah, woke my ass. I mean, not so much. Not so much. And the crazy part is, if you don't recognize that the mascot issue has become a party line vote. If you're Republican, you support racist mascots, and if you're Democrat, if you're on the right, you support it. If you're on the left, you oppose it. And of course, we can get into the whole, political correctness, being a problem, or what is it? That's political correctness run amok. No, using an existing living people, as mascots for your entertainment is wrong. It's just wrong. And you can say it's not offensive, but you don't get to decide that. It's like I said, it'd be like, I'm going to throw a punch somebody in the face, and I'm going to tell that person that I just punched whether it hurt or not. That's when you do something offensive that the receiving party views as offensive, you don't get to decide how offensive. It doesn't matter whether you claim that you don't mean to be offensive. I don't even buy that. I think when people do this stuff, they do mean to be offensive. They just don't care. Look, the whole thing with Trump assassinating somebody, executing somebody, having somebody murdered on his order, that's a problem for me. Not because I'm a fan of Iraqi or Iranian leadership. I just think killing people I think that's wrong. And I'm not saying it because it's one of the 10 commandments or any other stuff. I just think the idea of murdering people is it's not a good thing. I mean, I'm sure I'm anti-war. I think that there are much better ways to resolve conflict than killing each other. I don't think you resolve conflict by trying to eliminate the conflict. And I got to say something here. The wording and the choice of words are just incredible. You'll never hear Trump claim to have assassinated him. You won't hear him. He'll say that he's been terminated or he's been eliminated. Terminated is what you do to someone who works for you. Eliminate is when you just remove somebody out of your field of view. Killing somebody, murdering somebody, assassinating somebody, and look, you guys can justify it all you want. And one of the ways that I find this will be a real trigger mechanism. If you mention the fact that what Trump did was wrong, that just triggers white people. They just lose their mind. And look, I know what some of you are saying. You got that not all white people thing. As Michael Harriot calls it, he goes, not all white people-itis is what he calls it. The first thing that people got to do is like, oh, yeah, but not all white people. Look, if you're not in that group who gets offended, I got a recommendation for you. Michael Harriot, who writes for The Root, is one of my favorite writers. I mean, he really is. And you got to pull up his latest, and it's called, let me see, I think it's called 6 Things that White People Can Do. and I just think that it's that's what it is. It's how to be a better white person. And just check it out. Just read it. Because, look, I don't care how woke you claim to be, how progressive you claim to be. You're going to find yourself, called out a little bit in this piece. And this is by Michael Harriot. Just came out just today. It's his today. It's his piece out today. How to be a better white person. 6 things you can do. This is 6 things you can do to be a better white person. So I recommend that you read it. But I also, and again, I hate to defer too much to Michael Harriot, but I got to read this piece for you because it matters. And this is something that he wrote just last week. Let me see if I can find it here. Excuse me. And I've talked about the subtle side of racism, but this is a piece that he wrote, and this was something he wrote when he was kind of calling out Mayor Pete and some of his decisions that were racially motivated as the mayor of South Bend. But this is a paragraph from the piece that he had written about Mayor Pete. He said, "In America, racism doesn't always present itself in the bold attire of venomous hate. Most often, white supremacy is cloaked in a suit and tie. It rarely looks you directly in the eye or stares with disdain. It is so vast and wide that it often overlooks your comparatively microscopically small existence. It reduces your desperately loud pleas for acknowledgement to a faint whisper. It makes you feel unseen and unheard." Now, Michael Harriot is black, but this could not be more appropriate, when you apply it to Native people. One, because we are such a small segment, our population has been eliminated from being 100% of the population on this continent to less than 0.7%. In New York City, which has a pretty large Native population, it's 100,000 people in an area that's, close to 10 million. I mean, in the outlying areas. And that's a large number for a group of Native people who are still pretty disenfranchised, and of course that's a broad definition of an indigenous person. But we're a small population, and we are unheard. We can talk about issues. The mascot issue is a perfect example. Is it and again, I get into this a lot of times. People say, "Well, is that the most important thing to talk about?" Well, I mean, that's not really the point. It's emblematic. It's emblematic of how meaningless our opinion is, even on issues that reference us and that are utilizing us or are being appropriated from us. You not only historically take lives and land and resources and dignity, you take identity, and then you claim it for yourself. I mean, looking at a bunch of white people say, "Oh, no, I'm a Redskin. I'm a proud Redskin. Once a Redskin, always a Redskin." When I see stuff like that, it just makes my skin crawl. It really does. It really does. Hey, I forgot to do this here. I've got a brand new video out. Reggie, you should pull it up. I got a brand new video out on my YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV on YouTube, and it's called "We're Not Your Mascots." Pull it up. It actually just went live at 2:00 today. I should have I should link it. Maybe when I take a break, I'll put it up on as a link on the message on this live stream. But please do take a look at it. It's really good. I got to give my buddy Jake Proud, who works in studio with me, a lot of props for this thing. It is a very good video. Features my good friend Donna Fan Boyle. When she joined me on my show, we use some audio from her. It is very good. If you can't find it, it should be up right now. It should have been up by 2:00. And it just points more of it out. And again, I know that we have missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have the highest rate of death by cop than any other segment of American society. So, look. I realize, that there may be issues that some people are going to say are more important. We have poverty issues, suicide issues. But, the mascot issue is emblematic. And it shows and this may be considered the subtle side of racism, but it's overt. It is really overt. And for us, that's, it couldn't be more clear. It couldn't be more clear. Try to go just to YouTube. Let's Talk Native TV YouTube channel. Oh, did you find it?
I found it. I shared the link
okay, all right.
on your
so
page.
Look for it on Facebook. Look for it on YouTube. You can go to my website, which is letstalknative.com.
Yeah, the link is on your Facebook page.
All right, perfect. By all means, check it out. I look forward to your feedback. Hey, I have to remind people, if you go on YouTube, you can, and of course, I think you got to log in or whatever. If you go on YouTube, you can leave comments there. I can be a little derelict in checking out those comments, but eventually I get to them. Not only do I look for your comments on Facebook, we do a talkback show here, so I get to hear your comments directly when we open up the phone lines. But this is my latest video, and again, I got to give my buddy Jake Proud credit for he's really the production guy. I'm just a guy talking. But Jake put it all together, and so I got to give him props. And let's see if we can get this thing shared. I think people need to understand what the issue is and understand it in a way that this isn't political correctness run amok. And like I said, not only does this racism in terms of using the mascot issue fall right along with political lines. This is, unfortunately, we also see this thing, cross over with people on the left who they want to minimize this stuff. So I think it's important. But again, one of the things that I wanted to kind of drill down a little bit on was this notion that racism is becoming more fashionable. And because of Trump, Trump didn't turn anybody who didn't already have racist tendencies into a racist. That already existed. That's been there. But you know what? Now they feel like it's normalized. Racism is normalized. They can say hateful things, and that's what I experienced. We can get into the whole debate about whether Soleimani should be eliminated. No, he should have been murdered by the United States. That's what he was. He was murdered. It was an assassination. There was no imminent threat. It was just he was killed by Trump's order because Trump wasn't happy with how the escalation was going. I mean, he supposedly responded to a contractor. And let's be clear what a contractor is, because you notice when they said a contractor got killed, they never identified him. They never said who he was or what he did. You know what contractors are? They aren't just the guys fixing the plumbing, and restoring infrastructure that the United States destroyed. Many of these guys are mercenaries. So it could be like the Blackwater type and that kind of stuff. So a contractor paid by the United States, who's, profiteering off of war and conflict in Iraq, was killed by one of the militia groups. And so Trump bombs the crap out of a couple of militia groups. And these are militias that are supported by Iran. Now, keep in mind, and this is where it gets confusing. The reason some of the tensions, on the, at least militarily, had subsided with Iran is because Iran and the United States found themselves as uncomfortable partners in fighting ISIS. And so the fact that Iran has increased its influence in Iraq has been very troublesome to Donald Trump. So he blasts a bunch of these sites. Then a bunch of people get mad in Iraq and start protesting the embassies. And so they send in the Marines, and what's he do? He kills the second most influential Iranian leader in Iran. He kills him in Iraq, has a drone strike come. And of course, it's not just one guy. He also kills an Iraqi, and they never mentioned how many other people were killed, or they rarely do. But it wasn't just two guys. It wasn't two evil guys. I mean, there are innocent people that are always going to be killed in these situations. And so, 4, 5, maybe 6 people got killed because there was 2 carloads of people who were murdered in this assassination strike. So all I'm saying is that this guy was killed by somebody who is a lot like him. Guy who's responsible for killing people, ordering the deaths and the rocket attacks and the drone strikes on people. Frankly, the Soleimani, Obama did some of the same thing that Soleimani did. Bombed, bombed people, killed people, ordered strikes. Yeah, how many?
18,000 bombs per month.
Yeah, and these bombs aren't just killing one person. And unlike the Iranian bombs that don't necessarily find their target, United States has smart bombs, right? They can claim all their technological superiority. When they shoot a rocket or a missile, they kill people. These aren't fireworks, folks. And of course, my biggest issue is that you create these tensions, and then young people, our sons and daughters, end up paying the price. They get sent into a battlefield, and as much as it pains me, I know that Native people enlist in the military at the highest rate, proportionally than any other group of people. Don't understand it. I don't support it. It angers me that Native people will enlist in the very military that murdered their own people, their own grandparents, their own great-grandparents. Don't get it. Wouldn't do it. In fact, I would oppose my kids even suggesting, or my grandkids now, even suggesting that they would ever join the military. I wouldn't disown them, but I would do everything humanly possible to talk them out of it. And frankly, I know people. I know a couple of young people. One guy in particular, who's actually my grandson's cousin, is in Kuwait right now, or at least last I heard. So he may very well get sent into harm's way because of this escalation, and I just find it very, very problematic. And look, we can get into debate whether this was a distraction over impeachment or an attempt for approval ratings in the run-up to the 2020 election, all that other stuff. There's no justification, and no matter what people think is the reason, the fact of the matter is that people are dying. And I have problems with that. And I think the whole idea that one person gets to decide who lives and dies, no trial, and lots of propaganda out there. And let's, I got to remind people again, The United States kills people all the time and have been. I mean, what Noam Chomsky said, that every president since World War II, literally has been guilty of war crimes. Well, let's not leave World War II out of the whole thing. I mean, the United States bombed civilian targets in Japan. Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, a military base that was established on an illegally occupied territory, the Kingdom of Hawaii. The Hawaiian Kingdom. I know there's some language issues there. The Hawaiian Kingdom was illegally occupied by the U.S. military, and then they built up this huge military presence. One, as a threat to Japan. So Japan bombs Pearl Harbor. The United States bombed Tokyo and 5 other cities in 1945, in March of 1945. No, I'm not talking about Nagasaki and Hiroshima. This is 6 months before that. Bombed civilian targets, killed men, women, and children, schools, hospitals, leveled Tokyo in March. Then in August, said, well, we pretty much have them on their knees. We can pretty much just wait for their surrender. But, we built these 2 bombs, so let's just use them. The only country to ever use an atomic or a nuclear weapon against an enemy or against a foe is the United States. And they want to claim to have the moral authority over nuclear weapons. This whole battle with the biggest tension with Iran is over whether they develop a nuclear weapon as a deterrent. Now, who would they need a nuclear weapon as a deterrent for? Well, perhaps the guy who's murdering their people. So, look, I'm not a fan of any theocracy, whether it's Israel, whether it's Iran, whether it's any or monarchies, whether it's Saudi Arabia, none of this stuff. I'm not a fan of that. But you know what? That's not my place. I don't live there. I'm not those people. And I'm not saying there isn't a right to condemn human rights offenses and that kind of stuff. Absolutely. But the idea that the United States has somehow enabled themselves to be the moral authority on all these issues is just wrong. I remember seeing a big billboard. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago on the show. It talked about all the people killed by communism, and it listed China and Russia and Soviet Union, all this stuff, all the way down through Cuba. Listed all these countries, and I don't know if they put 22 million. I think it was on the sign. I think it was something like that. 22 million people killed by communism. Well, how many people were killed by democracy? I mean, let's start with 50 million native people killed in North America alone, and then we can move on from there. I mean, the amount of people that the United States has killed in the Middle East, the amount of people that they've been responsible, amount of death they've been responsible. I mean, after the last massacre against native people on Turtle Island, they moved offshore. Not only do they illegally occupy Hawaii, then they go into to killing Filipinos. In Stephen Kinzer's book, True Flag, there's a line in there where he says, for the first time, Americans found themselves shooting upon people fighting for their independence. Wrong. Maybe for the first time on another land, but all the native people who were killed, they were all fighting for their independence. And we're still fighting for our independence. But, again, with Donald Trump clearly running on a racist platform, a white supremacy platform, there's no question that he has normalized and created a level of acceptance. And look, the entire right wing of the political spectrum, they don't just look the other way on racism. They embrace it. They justify it. They support his racist comments, his racist actions. And to be clear, even murdering a guy an Iranian in Iraq, that's a brown person. This is a white guy killing a brown person. It is what it is. There's no getting around it. That's just what it is. What it is. And the reason at the beginning of the show I talked about people looking at this, not only this piece in The Root by Michael Harriot, this 20 things what white people can do to be better, how to be a better white person. We've got callers who call onto this show, and they couldn't more clearly be overt racist, even though they want to claim that they're progressive. And the paragraph also that I read, that this idea of silencing us. When I hear somebody say, talk about identity politics being the problem, it'd be fine if you were talking about nationalism or white supremacy, but you're not. I mean, when you call in and you're going to talk about Black Lives Matter is the problem, or pushing LGBT issues is the problem. That you're saying all you voices that we've been trying to obscure, stay obscured. Get over it. Don't talk. Be silent. And if you don't like it, leave. I mean, it's crazy to me that even at WBAI here, we can have that conversation. All right, hey, we're going to take a break. But before we do it, let me, as Reggie said at the top of the hour, we aren't in a fund drive mode anymore. But, well, we're kind of always in a fund drive mode. So I do want to encourage people. I mentioned this week that I've got my own little race going on for WBAI buddies. I'm in the pack of the leaders here. If I had even 2 more WBAI buddies signed up, I would make the top 5 of active shows here. And I'd like to move a little higher than that. So here's what I got. I got one of my favorite books. I got Pagans in the Promised Land, the book by Stephen Newcomb. It is the bottom line. It is the book on the doctrine of Christian discovery. It lays out the doctrine of domination. It couldn't be more thorough. Honestly, I mean, it is that good a book. It is the basis for the film that I've shown downstairs called The Doctrine of Discovery. I'll send to the next people who sign up as a WBA buddy, we'll send you a copy of Pagans in the Promised Land. So I want to tip the scales. I want to get up there. I'm cheating a little bit, so I want to get some of you guys signed up. And look, $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month. Hey, Reggie had a good idea. We're celebrating our 60th anniversary. What a coincidence. I just turned 60 last month, and this month the station turned 60.
Man. The stars are aligned,
I got to do something there, right?
Hey.
All right, so how about this? You sign up $60 a month. I know some of you are going to say, it's a little pricey. Well, then do 5, do 10. But if you can do $60 a month, that'd be great. And here's what you do. You go to the pledge line. Go to 516-620-3602. I'm going to say it slower again. I know I got scolded the last time. 516-620-3602. That's the number to call. And tell them you want to become a WBA buddy, and you want to do it in the name of Let's Talk. You got that's important. It's important to me. The money doesn't come to me. It all goes into the general fund for WBA. But again, 516-620-3602. You can go online. You can go to give2wbai.org. That's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI.org. And you know what? If you don't want to become a buddy, if you just want to make a donation, then do that. You can do a one-time donation. And look, I had a caller a few weeks ago say, some people may not want to get in the system. Well, if you don't want to be in the system, but you still want to support, here's what you do. Go down to the post office, get a postal money order. Don't even put your name on it. Just put WBAI Pacifica, or Pacifica WBAI, and then put it in the mail. 388 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11217. That's it. 388 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11217. Put a postal money, and just if you're one of the guys who calls in, you can see. When I ask you, what's your name, where you're calling from, I don't care what name you give me. I don't care what location. I'm just trying to be friendly here. That's just kind of a sociable thing. But let me know that you threw a postal money order, and we're not going to track you down. I'd love to give you something, but look, if you want to just make a donation, then by all means do it. We need your help. WBAI, it could not be more important now than it ever has been. Look, everybody thinks, the threat to war has subsided. Look, as long as you got that moron in the White House, you don't know what's going to happen. So let's keep this in mind. I want to remind people also, don't forget to check out my YouTube video. It's I'm proud of this piece. Again, my friend Donna Fan Boyle's on it. So, all right, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. I got a little bit more I want to go through, and then we're going to get ready to go to your calls. And I look forward to hearing your calls. This is actually my first show live in studio, because last week I recorded a show, and of course we came out of the holidays and that kind of stuff. So this is my first my first crack right here in studio, brand new studio. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, and ultimately if you're watching us on YouTube, because this will be on YouTube, you'll see it's nice and bright in here. I'm overlooking Atlantic Avenue out the window here, and I'm not really sunbathing, but close to it. So if you notice the light changing in here, it's because the sun's setting, and we'll start out brighter, and I'll promise that I won't get less bright, even if the light in the room does. So this is John Kane. This is Let's Talk. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Highway 16, where did our sisters go? Highway 16, where did our sisters go? Seems like nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody knows. Well, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, brothers and sisters, we've all lost someone. I thought every life mattered, each and every single one. Highway 16, where did our sisters go? Highway 16, where did our sisters go? Seems like nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody knows. I don't know the answer, and I don't know what to do. The people in power, they won't listen to me and you. We gotta keep on fighting if we wanna know the truth. Highway 16, where did our sisters go? Highway 16, where did our sisters go? Seems like nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody knows. Highway 16, where did our sisters go? Highway 16, oh, where did our sisters go? Seems like nobody cares, yeah. Nobody cares, nobody knows. Seems like nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody knows. Just like the love before, nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody knows. Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. I played that song in its entirety because I was busy sharing my YouTube video. Look, I hope you guys look for this thing. It's again, I think between my buddy Jake and I, we're trying to produce a better product. It's what we try to do. Just like down here at WBAI. Look, we've got a new studio. We're trying to improve the sound. We're trying to improve the look. not every show is streaming live video of the show. Hopefully more of them will as we go forward. But, our capability is directly proportional to the support that we get from you, the listeners. So that's why we ask you to make a donation. Again, the pledge line's 516-620-3602. And I am trying to push out getting a few more buddies. And in fact, I'm almost at 30 WBAI buddies. I'd love to double that. As we go through, even in the beginning of the year. This is New York City, for crying out loud. We got 10 million people in the listening area, and of course, unlimited number of people listening online. So there's no reason we can't. Back home, I try to encourage my listeners to Let's Talk Native, which is the show that I do from the Seneca Territory. I encourage them to check out the show in New York, because the neat thing about doing a show in New York is that we're a talkback show and we get to hear from you. Look, a couple things before we get to the phone lines, and I do have to impress upon not just those who enable racism to occur. I mean, and again, I think Michael Harriot makes a great point in his piece about how to become a better white person. Look, if you just look the other way, and if you don't speak up or at least say something. I mean, what do they say? See something, say something. And then what they tell you on the subway and all that other stuff. It's not enough to claim that you're not a racist. If you're not an anti-racist, if you aren't actively, and when I say active, I'm not asking you to call the cops or physically assault or strike or stab or anything else. I mean, that's kind of what Harriet says. Nobody's asking you to run a sword through them, but say something. Somebody tells you a racist joke, say, "I'm sorry, I just don't get it." Make them cringe and uncomfortably have to explain how racism is funny. I mean, just do a little bit more. I mean, think back, and this is what Harry does a good job talking about. I mean, look, on December 26th, I did a special show about the largest mass execution in the history of the United States, Mankato, Minnesota, day after Christmas, 1862. Over 4,000 people from the town, from Mankato, Minnesota, came out the day, part of their Christmas celebration, the day after Christmas. They were just singing Christmas carols, and they come out to watch 38 Dakota be hung by the neck in a massive gallows, a gallows big enough to put all 38 of them up there at the same time. They even made it so there was nooses on all four sides, so it was like theater in the round for these white folks. With one blow of the axe, they could drop all 38 of them, and all the fine people, white people of Mankato, Minnesota, got to witness it. Now, did every one of those white people enjoy it? I don't know. Sadly, maybe they did. But if you are among those people, whose ancestors, just look the other way during the slave trade, or look the other way during lynchings, or look the other way when scalps were being turned in for bounties. I'm not just saying if you were participating, but if you just look the other way, that's what you're doing now if you don't stand up to racism. I mean, relatively. I mean, let's put it in perspective. So, and I know it's become more fashionable to have these, to spew, racist thoughts and, and comments and that kind of stuff. Like I said, in the last week, I've been told more times, you don't like, you get out of the country. By white folks. So, and some of those white folks may only be, one or two generation, second or third generation Americans. And they're going to tell me, a Native person, to get out of the country if I don't like it. So if you have a problem with the United States, don't try to fix it. Just leave. That's what they're trying to say. We don't want things fixed. We like the way it is, just the way it is right now. Of course, it's not like you don't hear people on the right bitch like hell. And nobody says if you don't like it, leave. but that's the attitude. And so look, there's far too many people, white people, enabling racism. May not be racist themselves, although they are all enjoying white privilege. They may not be racist themselves, but you're enabling it. So when you call up here and you try to tell me, well, I oppose all racism. No, there's only one kind of racism. Racism's a one-way street. There's only one demographic group of people that have the power to make racism what it is, which is systemic, and that's white people. So when I say racism is a white thing, I know I'm going to get some calls. No, it's racist for you to say that. No, it isn't. Calling out racism is not racist. It's an absurd proposition. So I'm really concerned about those people who enable racism. But Democrats, let's be clear, you're enabling the monkey in the White House too. I mean, you just passed a $1.4 trillion spending package.
NDAA.
The National Defense Authorization Act. And you included a Space Force, border wall. And you want to say, yeah, but we got pregnancy and maternal leave. Well, I got to tell you, I'm not a big fan of anybody being in the military, but least of all, the people that I thought would help with some conscience on things like war, women.
But that's Space Force, though.
But Space Force. Yeah, you're going to fund a Space Force. Whatever the hell that is. Then I just saw something recently. They want to use some of the illegally occupied territory of Hawaii as one of the bases of operation for the Space Force. Isn't that great? Yeah. Congratulations, Hawaii. You won. You won the Space Force lottery. Jeez. But, look, it's great that, there's all this, grandstanding over standing up to Trump, but you're writing the checks. You're writing the checks for him. And like I said, we're battling all this stuff. One of the other things I want to mention, my show back home, I talked about the battle over gaming revenue, because in Oklahoma, there's like 27 native territories that have casinos, and they're all fighting the governor, who by the way, all you folks who say, oh, well, we really need is a native president. No, we don't. No, we don't need somebody who claims to be native running for office because they're going to somehow be superior. Are we going to claim that native is, that there's native superiority? Because the governor of Oklahoma, he claims to be Cherokee, and who's he trying to screw? The Cherokee. Hey. Yeah, there you go. Happened before. It's happened before. So. And the three biggest native peoples in Oklahoma, which are the Cherokee, the Choctaw, and the Chickasaw, they're suing the governor of Oklahoma because he's claiming that he can just shut them down by walking away from the gaming compact that they have. Because according to federal law, in order to open up a casino under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, you have to have a compact with the state. Well, it's interesting, and again, this is where I gotta hold my criticism to the Democrats. We're having a similar battle with the Democrat in the governor's mansion in New York. I know he gave his big State of the State address yesterday, and I'm not even going to get into the details of that. All I know is that he is still trying to screw Native people, the Senecas in particular. And it's not even just there. We're in a constant battle with the state of New York and the federal government, for that matter, over anything that we do to generate revenue. So we're in the tobacco business, we're in the gaming industry, we do fuel sales. Any of these things where we try to market our regulatory advantage, meaning we don't pay taxes to New York State, we end up in a battle with New York State. And it doesn't matter who's in the office. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. This is where I say racism isn't a right thing, it's a white thing. And the white guy who's the governor of the state of New York, he has made as bold a racist comment as anybody. The guy who's running from New York City here, Bloomberg, running for the presidency, he told the previous Democratic governor, David Patterson, who's blind. He says, you need to get a shotgun and get up on the thruway and tell the Senecas who's in charge. He literally suggested that the blind governor should arm himself with a shotgun and stand up on the New York State Thruway where they cross the Seneca territory and tell the Senecas who's boss. That's the gun control guy. That's the gun control guy telling you that. So, again, these are just a few examples of when I suggest that racism is a white thing, not a right thing. I could go into it more, but I can't get over the fact that we want to ignore how much the Democrats enable the Republicans to do what they do. I mean, it's pathetic. And of course, look, Trump had his way. He stacked the Supreme Court. He enriched the rich at the cost of the poor, and the only thing everybody concerns about is as long as that stock market keeps rising, doesn't matter that income disparity is increasing. Doesn't matter how many. It doesn't. And here's the crazy part: is that white folks who are supporting him don't even realize that when he cuts the food stamp program, it's white folks who are the primary beneficiary. There are more white people on food stamps than anybody else. Why? Because there's more white people than anybody else. So, I mean, look, I can't. You can't be any more clear about how much this guy is not benefiting anybody but himself, his family, and his wealthy friends. And when you look at how much the GOP has aligned themselves with Trump, I mean, Lindsey Graham was one of the most vocal, outspoken critics of Donald Trump. I mean, he basically called him, all kinds of names. And now he's his biggest advocate. McConnell, all these guys. And I know some of you are saying, yeah, I thought you don't involve yourself in American politics. No, I don't vote. I don't vote in American elections. They're not my elections. And they're not my not my president, not my senator, not my court. But you know what? I get impacted by all this stuff. And look, I saw a bunch of the posts I could put up. I saw somebody put a map of Florida and they circled, Trump's Delago. And
He's playing golf.
Hey, Iran, he's playing golf. And then I see black people and native people saying, "Hey, Iran, it wasn't us. They don't like us either." You know what? But we still enlist in their military. Mm-hmm. Listen to Buffy St. Marie's Universal Soldier. Stop putting your kids in harm's way. Stop letting your kids be the pawns of the U.S. military-industrial complex. Stop doing it. And look, and if you think your best options in life lie with shouldering a rifle and being prepared to kill in the name of the President of the United States, if you think that's a good career move, then you need to find different advisors. I don't care if it's your parents or whoever else is telling you that. That's what you are enlisting for. You're not enlisting to defend. There's no defense going on here. Over 200,000 troops deployed in 70 different countries. They're not defending American interests. I mean, they may be defending themselves because they're in hostile territory. Well, get the hell out of hostile territory. Stop illegally occupying lands. That's my view. I mean,
and why is it hostile territory?
Well, because the United States made it hostile territory. I mean, when I hear people always, those folks in the Middle East, they've been fighting for 100 years. Yeah, guess who was behind it? When it wasn't just Great Britain and their imperialism, in comes the United States with theirs. Most of the tensions that exist throughout the world, again, Noam Chomsky, the biggest rogue state on the planet is the United States. And it isn't just a recent phenomenon. Again, can I remind people again? There's only one country that was reckless enough to use a nuclear weapon against another people. And the crazy part is you come out of World War II, and the United States sits at the table to decide what is and isn't going to be considered a war crime. Dropping atomic bombs on 2 Japanese cities, civilian targets. Now, that's not a war crime.
Hundreds of thousands.
Millions of people displaced. In the end, I don't even know if they ever really been able to put a firm number because you have people who died of fallout. Millions between the bombings, the largest aerial assault ever perpetrated against anybody, which was, again, I think it was March 10th of 1945. Tokyo and 4 other cities were bombed by U.S. and, of course, their partners, Great Britain and others. Bombed by, the largest aerial assault ever undertaken. 6 months later, 2 atomic bombs dropped in Japanese cities. So there's no moral high ground for the United States to claim. And again, when I hear people say, "Oh, Soleimani, he was responsible for hundreds, maybe even thousands of deaths," every president of the United States has blood on his hands. Every general of the United States has blood. It's not just this one guy in Iran who does. That's what they do. There's only been 23 years of U.S. history that the United States wasn't actively involved in a military conflict someplace. And that's even somewhat questionable because they have their official military conflicts and then the ones that they, I mean, the conflicts against Native people, most of those weren't so-called declared wars, but they still happen. Still people are being killed. Only 23 years of the entire U.S. existence has been without, overt military conflict. So pretty much, and I don't mean it was a 23-year stretch either. Pretty much every president, and like you said, there may be the guy who died a few days after getting in office.
Right.
I don't think Harrison was.
He may be the only one.
Yeah,
that
he
really,
probably had blood on his hands.
Yeah.
He had snot on his hands. He died of pneumonia, I think, or something like that. So he didn't have blood on his hands. That's why we call them Ranatagayas, the town destroyers, because they didn't just destroy a town; they destroyed people's lives, every single one of them. So, I mean, before people start trying to, pitch who the good guys are and who the bad guys, and how the good guys get to decide what bad guys live or die. If you're going to create a standard for what is and isn't good, make sure you hold everybody to that standard, because you're going to find an awful lot of U.S. presidents. What was the number? How many bombs did Obama?
18,000 per month.
Per month. 18,000 bombs, strikes, rockets, missiles, whatever, per month under Barack Obama, and he won a Nobel Peace Prize. Of course, he won the Nobel Peace Prize first, and then went on to his bombing campaign. I mean, look, the level of absurdity is almost too thick to cut. But I think it's important that people put things in their proper perspective. Look, there's a lot of propaganda, and I'm not saying that Soleimani was a good guy, and I'm not even saying that he was or that he wasn't worse than some of these U.S. presidents. But he didn't drop an atomic bomb on anybody. He didn't. So I just think you got to put things in perspective. And one of the things that I try to do with the show is when I talk about history, I try to make it I try to put it in perspective. I try to make it relative so people understand what took place. When I talk about the execution in Mankato, Minnesota, I mean, you just can't look at it as the cavalry against the Indians. You got to put it in perspective that the Civil War is going on. There's people living and fighting and dying over slavery and issues related to slavery. The Republicans weren't against slavery necessarily; they just knew that it was it was unsustainable. I mean, when Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation a week after this execution, when he signs this thing into law in January of 1863. He didn't free the slaves in the North, only the ones in the South. Look, and don't just take my word for it. Look it up. And again, Bob Henley, who I've had on the show a bunch of times, and he's been on with a few producers. He did a nice piece talking about how New Jersey was one of the states that resisted signing the 14th Amendment. They had slaves in New Jersey. And they were on the Union side of the Civil War, but they were maintaining the slaves. Pennsylvania, yeah, all you guys, and let's not forget, the hypocrisy of all these founding fathers in their fight for freedom as they all were slaveholders. And and of course, what we get all the time is we'll say, well, yeah, but you have to consider the times. No, slavery was always wrong, folks. It may not have always been illegal, but it was always wrong. And of course, there are plenty of people who would argue that slavery still exists because of income disparity, and that people are locked in, and they are at some level. And of course, we know that there is slavery that still exists. There's the slave trade. There's the sex trade, and nobody is more targeted than Native people proportionally than Native people. I mean, that's just what exists. I mean, so anyway, we're gonna go to a break. We're gonna take your phone calls. The number to call in is 212-209-2970. 2877 212-209-2877. I want to remind people that I am going to give away some Pagans in the Promised Land for those of you willing to sign up as a WBAI buddy to Let's Talk with John Kane. Go to the pledge line, 516-620-3602. You can go online at www.give2WBAI.org. And again, for those of you who want to make a one-time donation, you can do it on the phone. You can do it on the website. And if you go to the website, you can even find out how to do it by text. There's a specific text number that you can call in and make a donation. Do you have that text number?
Yes, 41444.
All right, you can text that number and make a donation via text. Never done that myself, but it's probably the simplest way to do it. Actually,
It really is easy.
Yeah,
It really is.
But if you don't want, if you're one of the guys who don't want to be in the system, as I said, run down to the post office, get a postal money order. You don't even have to fill out who it's from. Just put Pacifica WBAI in the pay to the order slot, and then send it to Pacifica WBAI at 388 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn, New York 11217. And that way you do the right thing and you still remain anonymous. All right, we're going to take a break and come back to your calls. Again, 212-209-2877. We'll look for the phone lines to light up, and we'll go to your calls when we come back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk.
Well, someday I'll never learn. Someday I'll never learn. Well, I lit the fires and I'm the one that got burned. When I was a young man, I had money to burn. I partied every night with every penny that I earned. I bought drinks for everybody, never got one in return. Well, someday I'll never learn. Someday I'll never learn. I'll lit the fires and I'm the one that got burned. Sometimes I feel alone in the middle of the night, but I ain't no fool. My mama raised me right, but I know, baby, I know you ain't treating me right.
All right, thanks for coming back. That's my buddy Murray Porter, and he is my buddy. Murray's a Mohawk blues artist, one of my favorites. Obviously, I dedicated a whole show to him. A few weeks back, and he is my buddy, and I love a guy who can take music and make it relevant to social issues. Even that last show, last song, even though it's kind of a little bit of a lighter joke song, it makes light of the fact that we don't learn. We keep doing the same things over and over again. Hey, I want to mention something. I saw one of my comments during the break here. My friend Amy reminded me that, after they executed those folks in Mankato, Minnesota, they actually created souvenirs. Yes. Not only beer trays and plaques, but you know how spoons and thimbles, how they mark these historical things. You can actually go and the funny thing is, the first time I ever saw this, it was on like American Pickers or one of these, shows on cable that where people come up with these collector items and that kind of stuff. And the guys were raving, oh yeah, this is a commemorative beer tray from, some beverage company that depicted, again, an illustration of the execution with all the fine folks from Mankato, Minnesota, with their parasols and everything else out there, standing out there the day after Christmas to watch an execution. Yeah. So not only does this stuff happen, but there's pride that comes with it. I mean, and it's absurd on so many different levels. It really is. All right. Okay. As I promised, I want to go to your calls. I'm expecting some good ones here. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to look. I ask you your name, and I'm not trying to impose on you. I'm asking your name just to be sociable and where you're calling. It gives me an idea of what, who we're reaching and that kind of stuff. But this isn't a test. There's no wrong answer. You give me your name or you cannot give me your name. You can all be Bob as far as I'm concerned. Just not too many Billy Bobs, I hope. All right. Caller, you're up first. What's your name and where are you calling from? All right, we got you?
Sam, calling from Queens.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for calling and being a part of the show.
I was just listening to your point about, trying to, those people that say, oh, you got to put slavery into historical context, how, back then it was right, and back now we're looking at it as wrong. I mean, pretty much to a fault, all those societies, ancient societies that we put up on a pedestal, whether it's ancient Greece or ancient, the old African kingdoms or the Middle East, I mean, all of them were built on slavery. So at a certain point in human history, they obviously viewed it differently than we're viewing it now. Am I right?
Yeah, but does it mean that it wasn't wrong then? If it wasn't wrong, then why would it change?
I mean, so were they all going around with thinking, wow, this is all really horrible, but we're going to do it anyway.
Sure.
Across, they all view themselves as doing the wrong thing for thousands of years, and then all of a sudden we woke up and we're like, you know what the heck? That was a bad thing. We should stop that.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't all of a sudden. It wasn't all of a sudden. In fact, the United States was one of the last countries to really oppose slavery. In fact, Great Britain was already, dialing back. And it's not to say that imperialism wasn't still imposing terrible conditions on people as a part of the colonialism. But no, slavery was something that
transitions through human history, where it's a spectrum. We're going through this narrative, this self-reflection, and being like, wow, those things that we're all doing, we're reassessing, and we're saying, this is not okay. So I mean, to take a 21st century point of view and apply it 1,000 years ago would surely be somewhat mistaken. I mean, 1,000 years ago, everyone's slavery is rampant, and to say the entire world is knowingly acting completely immorally is strange in my head.
Yeah, but
to go back 100, 200 years.
But to put it in perspective, the reason it's important to recognize that there was hypocrisy among the founding fathers of the United States is because they were spouting out things like, truth, justice, and liberty and pursuit of happiness. All men are created equal, but they didn't mean it. And the fact of the matter is, we live today in a circumstance where there are people who still have not caught up socially economically, opportunity-wise, from the conditions that the United States was built on. The United States was built upon that slavery. And in 1850, if you were to assign a value to the assets of American industry, the biggest number would be assigned to slavery. Slavery was considered the most valuable asset of American history in 1850, and so, but we get into this conversation about bootstraps, about why don't people just lift themselves up by their bootstraps the way Americans did, and they want to say America was built on these ideal principles. No, it wasn't, and that's the whole point. The whole point is to acknowledge some of that stuff. And look, I mean. There's at some level, I mean, there's still prison industries where people are imprisoned and forced to work, even in the United States. I mean, that still exists today. And we still don't evaluate that. In fact, when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he didn't end all slavery. Prison slavery was still
a major
still very
political move, to driving the Civil War. All I'm saying is that as far as, let's say 100 years hence, they're going to look back at our incarceration, our prison systems, and be like, man, they were rank hypocrites. They were horrible people. What type of immoral, crazy society was this? When we're going through that transition, we're evolving our sense of right, our sense of ethics, so that, to go ahead 250 years ago and say, oh, they were all like snickering to themselves when they're saying freedom and equality, and being like, oh, heck, you guys are.
No, but you have to understand, there were always people who opposed it. I mean, unfortunately, they were in the minority. I mean, there were always people who've opposed atrocities, and many women were outspoken at the time, but they didn't have a voice, because that was the situation that existed 150 years ago or 200 years ago. So, I mean, it was to suggest that if you go back in time. All atrocities can find sanctuary in being right. It was never right. I mean, it may have been a practice. It may have been a common practice.
That we're evolving our perspective to now say, that was, totally not okay, when at that point that was becoming something that they recognized as not okay. At the same time, when they're putting forth this concept of freedom and liberty, that was somewhat groundbreaking. To then expand that to our time, to all peoples, it's just like a work in progress. So, like, to go back in time and always objectively judge against our moral compass now just strikes me,
Well, and while I don't completely disagree with you, the problem is we have people who, on the right especially, who want to act as if the founding fathers had everything right, and the whole point is that they didn't. I mean, and when people talk about the Constitution being this infallible document, it wasn't. I mean, it clearly wasn't. And you made a good point. You said in 100 years we might look back and see and finally recognize some of the things that many people are talking about now. Women's rights, incarceration rates, how people of color are still, disproportionately poor. I mean, yeah, in 100 years, maybe it can be well established that was wrong. But right now, we're still fighting it now, because and part of the reason we're still fighting it now is because there is this belief that somehow, if you go back, and if you look at you could somehow say that it was at one time it was okay. So look, Sam, I appreciate the call, and you make a good point. I think if you do go back in history, you can find there was always going to be certain levels of acceptance. Look, they thought they could burn people because they thought they were witches. I mean, it wasn't widespread and rampant, but it was commonplace enough in Salem. For that, but I appreciate the call. I really do. It was a good comment, and again, it helps keep the conversation going, which is what I appreciate. Thanks a lot for your call. All right, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Emmanuel. I'm calling from Brooklyn.
Hey, Emmanuel. Thanks for calling.
All right. Okay. I think the mistake that most good-natured people make is that we think we could fight against racism. There's no fighting against racism. Racism either is or it isn't. You're either a racist or you're not. And what happens now is that we have digitized racism. So we have an algorithm for it. It's an addictive brain process. And we're going to come to understand why Donald Trump is so important, because he has liberated the self-identified white American psyche. They have been fed racist thoughts subtly, overtly, since the founding of this country. You can't self-identify as a white person without being racist. The problem is that when so-called progressives deny their racist inclinations and put it to the background because they're trying to fight it instead of trying to understand why it's there, that's where the problem is. And that's why you hear all of this talk, but yet still we have these reactionary people being elected for government. So now you have a network like Fox TV. This guy just wrote a book the other day. It's called Foxocracy, where they have actually algorithmized the hate. So they know that it's an addictive process, and they put it out there as that. So when we're here as good-natured people talking about, well, we're going to show people that you're doing wrong and all of this other kind of stuff, we're wasting a lot of energy that we could be using to build our own strength as good-natured people, not to fight racism, because either you are racist or you're not. And to tell you the truth, racism needs that standing wave. It needs that other to back against it. So the more you think you're fighting it, the more you're actually supporting it, because to live as a white person, a self-identified white person in this country, you have to be living in pathological denial. And so because of that, there's a shame attached to that. So you need to cover that. So all of that stuff is deeply embedded. So when we're seeing Donald Trump is a natural outgrowth of all of these years of this kind of suppression and release. Suppression and release. Obama came in at a time when after George Bush, they would have voted for anybody. So when Obama came in, he was everybody, all the progressives were saying, oh, we're voting for the black guy, and blah, blah, but they were trying to cover over. They were trying to put the hope out there, and they turned to a black man, which they knew he could only do so much, and Obama himself knew he could only do so much, because being a labeled black man, whether he identifies himself with that or not, he was going to be under certain constraints. So within that, it gave the progressives a reason to say, look, we put Obama in and he couldn't do anything. So it gives them even more a reason to say, well, the black guy can't do it. Well, I'm going to get somebody who I think is going to overthrow all of that. So I'm going to go for the Donald Trump. And these are the subtleties that we're not understanding. We're looking at it as this polarized situation, which it is, but there's a lot of nuances there. We need
but let me get a chance to respond a little bit, because I don't think that to suggest you can't oppose racism or you can't fight racism. I think racism has to be more clearly identified as what is and what isn't. And but I will say that people of color can't end racism. I mean, the racists have to end racism, and so what you've got to do. Let me finish. I mean, what you've got to do is you've got to hold people accountable, and we have to make it less socially acceptable. Now, the problem is that people of color don't control the systems. It's white folks that do. So we do have to appeal. We have to appeal to even, there's nobody in a better position to resist racism than those who have white privilege in the first place. So,
the only reason why you have racism is because you have white people who want to distinguish themselves different than everybody else on the planet. So because they're in that position to be that and self-identify as white and put themselves out there, you can't tell genetically a white person from a black person. You can't. There's no genetics for it. It's a fact of because of the way you look, you might get treated differently. But that's where we have to challenge these so-called progressives and their talk about white this and white that and white privilege and all of this other kind of stuff, because those are the people who are denying their racism.
Well, and again, I defer back to Michael Harriot's column this morning, and he makes the mention that the problem is you've got progressives who want to who want to deny being white. So they not only want to reject this notion of benefiting from white privilege, They actually get uncomfortable being grouped in as white people, and that's what I experienced with a caller a few weeks ago. He literally lost his mind on the radio because I called him a white person, and he says, "No, I'm not a white person. I'm a human being." Well, yeah, we're all human beings. I get that, but as long as we understand, and to your point, that racism has benefited one group of people over the other, and they weren't always the majority either. I mean, obviously, you look at apartheid Africa, but in the United States, the majority of the population, 53% of the U.S. population, is white, and so we only. I mean, but I guess my point is, I think that we do need to call it out, and I do think we need to resist it, and I think we need to. I don't think the problem is identifying racism. I mean, and I've heard people say this before, that the problem is the problem with racism is it keeps being brought up. I don't agree with that, but I appreciate your opinion on it. Again, Emmanuel from Brooklyn, thanks for calling and be a part of the conversation. Let me we'll keep going here. We'll go to another caller. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is that me?
Yeah, it's you.
Hey, how you doing? Charlie from Roslyn.
Hey, Charlie, how you doing?
I was the person.
I know you. I know who you are.
I was the person who said, "Don't call me a white man. I'm a human being." I've been a progressive my whole life. Okay.
You say that. You say that, and I hear you.
No. I know that. I've been fighting racism my whole life, and I know that too. And I've grown to not only fight white nationalists, but also black nationalists. I used to think just like you. Okay, I like you, John Kane. I wish you could bring me on your show for a half hour so we could just have a decent debate about this, because I don't think you're helping the cause of Indian people or people of color or anything in this country. I think you're doing damage.
And you think your opinion is what's going to strengthen people. You're going to lift up black people, and you're going to lift up people of color because you think it's wrong for people to have any distinguishing characteristics in their character.
No, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's inevitable. I mean, it's part of growth. I'm just saying. Yeah,
wait a minute. It's part of growth towards what?
Well, in anything in life, we grow. There's development.
Yeah, but so you're saying to identify yourself is backwards, and you got to grow forward to not doing that, because you don't understand, Charlie. Some of the stuff that you say is overtly racist. I mean, and you don't even hear it as it's coming out of your mouth. I encourage you to please do look up The Root. Check out. Michael Harriot's column this morning. I mean, because I tell you, I read that thing and you immediately came to mind, because some of the views that you express, and you can call yourself a progressive all you want, but you harbor such distinct levels of racism. And even as you're telling me that you oppose racism, and because the first time you tell me that you hate it when black people are racist, tells me you don't even understand what the comment, what the expression means. You don't even know what it means. But Charlie, I encourage you to.
No, you're going to take me off the air, and then you can start talking about me, and I can't answer. Okay, tell me what I just said that was racist.
You just said you didn't explain what you meant by growth when you said, "Oh yeah, when people identify, that's part of growth."
Okay, let me explain it. I'm just saying, as a progressive, I became a progressive when I was like 12 years old.
Whatever that means, I'm not even sure what you mean by. You better explain what progressive means, because I don't.
No.
You're not demonstrating much progress here.
I had black people that I knew, and I saw racism. I saw this white racist. It was an ugly scene, and he was racist, and him and his family were racist against blacks, and I despised that. And I became very anti-racist, and then later on, when I became in my teens and early 20s, I'm walking down the street, and some black man looks at me and says, "I'm going to kill me a white man tonight." And I said to myself, way in the back of my mind, I said, "Whoa, I think this is a little more multidimensional than I thought."
But you realize that's not racism.
Okay,
that's racial bias.
Okay,
but let me finish here. What racism is if he could kill himself, a white person, draw a crowd and everybody clap and think it's okay. That's what racism is. Racism is when he is entitled to kill a white person. That's the difference between the two.
Okay, let me just make my point. Okay, the point is that as progressives, we grow. We grow. I'm still a progressive today. Go Bernie, okay? But I'm not thinking the way I was thinking 40 years ago. And I think we all grow. Hey, listen, people in the 90s, are still growing. People grow. And I just have different perspectives, and I listen to you, and I think you're a good, highly intelligent, and your listeners too, highly intelligent, and you're a decent person. But I think when I'm looking at this now and hearing it, I think you're doing some damage. And it upsets me.
But again, your comment about growth, because you still didn't explain it. When you suggested that somehow, I assume you hope that I'm going to grow out of this idea of identifying and having pride in my distinction, and then that I will evolve into a better human being where I don't, where my identity politics is no longer an issue. I mean, that's the assumption that I get from your comment.
Yeah, identity politics is feeding fascism, but I think deep down
and that's kind of a racist comment, by the way. But go ahead.
Okay, you could call me racist, but
no, I'm just saying it's a racist comment.
Okay, I don't agree with you, but I'm just saying that.
So you think identifying yourself, you think having pride in your distinction. I mean, so as a Native person who my experience is different than yours, and you think it's wrong for me to have a political view based on my identity. You say that I'm feeding fascism with that. That's literally what you just said, right?
No. When you say all white, when you imply that all white people are bad.
No, that's not identity. No, that's not what you're talking about with identity politics. You on a previous show mentioned the problem with Black Lives Matter or people fighting for LGBT. I mean, you've done this stuff. So your problem isn't with white people's identity. Your problem is being identified as white people.
And my friend, when I was 12 years old, when I first became a progressive, I was fighting white nationalism. I never stopped fighting white nationalism. Okay, but the point is with identity politics, whenever you say my group first, you're saying everybody else second, and that's just screwing up things in our country. Okay, I know they mean.
So what about America first? What about America first?
How about humanity first?
Yeah,
but that's the Native Americans,
but that's not.
People,
but that's not that's not identity politics.
How about humanity first?
But that's not identity politics, Charlie. Charlie, you're missing the point. The point is that if you say first, many of us are still trying to catch up to the disadvantage that we have to white people, and you're saying in the attempt to do that identity politics that we're using just to level the playing field is fascism.
No, I'm not saying it's fascism. I'm saying it feeds fascism.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, Charlie. Again, I've given you plenty of time. It's always interesting having you on. And again, please do read Michael Harriot's. What is it? How to Be a Better White Person in 2020. Just check it out. Look, you may read it and find it totally offensive, but in fact, if you don't, then I hope you at least have a mirror nearby. But read Michael Harriot's How to Be a Better White Person in 2020. He has 6 tips to being a better white person, and that's on The Root. You can find it online. And I encourage everybody. I mean, look, I'd love to get Michael Harriot on my show. I played a piece of his that he did. Man, it's got to be 4 or 5, maybe 5 years ago. Where he was a part of a protest, and he said, and nobody came, and it had to do with people claiming that they're going to do some protest at a mall, at a shopping mall, and all everybody did was stand on the sidewalk and be good little sheep. But since then, Michael Harriot has become a bit of a sensation. He's been on television, and I still hope to get him on my show one day, but he really is a great writer, and he's a great speaker, and again, I encourage people to check out some of his work. All right, let me go to we'll go to one more call before we take a break here. This is Let's Talk with John Kane. You're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
John, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, my name is Ellis. I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Hey, how you doing, Ellis?
Okay, I'm doing pretty good. First of all, I want to commend you. Unlike the last caller, who said that what you're doing has been more damaging than good, I think the damage has already been done.
Yeah.
And I think what you've been doing a good job of exposing it. And I want to encourage you. I'm a 70-year-old black man, okay? So I didn't just jump on the progressive movement when I was a little boy, okay? And I can tell a lot of the listeners what my mother, my grandparents, et cetera, experienced coming from the Deep South, and things that I've experienced as being a black man in Bed-Stuy all my life just about. Whenever I have you on the air, and there's somebody riding along with me in the car, they want to know, who is this guy? And it's not because you're making them feel bad. It's because you're enlightening them. So I want to encourage you to continue doing what you're doing, dude. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do, and I appreciate that.
If you step on toes, so be it. Because, not only have blacks and Native Americans and Hispanics, not only have they stepped on our toes, but we have gone through a whole lot of stuff that, something, some of it will never be corrected. It will never be corrected, as hard as we would like to try to get it done. But something that doesn't stop us from fighting peace and right. Now, I just want to say this. I don't know if you heard Roland Martin lately, but he exposed something on one of his latest panel discussions, one of which was that on the day that the second man in command was assassinated very methodically, on that same day, evidence was supposed to be released on Donald Trump that would solidify even some more charges that he may have been impeached again. So I take this as a distraction. I believe that the hit was ordered. Also, the Navy SEAL that was cited for all those atrocities where you had Navy SEALs, the toughest people in the military, on the stand crying in tears because of what they seen this guy done and Donald Trump pardoned. Well, I understand. He spent Christmas in Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. Jeez.
And who the hell knows what kind of an influence when you get two wicked folks together, whether they be black, white, or indifferent, look, you're going to see the product. Read between lines. Thank you for hearing me out.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, the whole idea that Trump made a practice out of pardoning and standing with people who have committed atrocities, and then if he spent Christmas with them, and then it's bizarre on so many different levels. But I appreciate the call, Alice. I really do, and I'll check into that. There's you can look at any given day and find more and more evidence that whether you look into Trump's past or you look into some of these emails that have been unredacted as far as people telling him that he was committing a crime by withholding the aid to Ukraine and the whole bit. The more and more comes out. But you know what? It doesn't really matter because the Republicans are so lined up with this guy. And just like the evangelical right, you had the editor of Christianity Today who writes the editorial saying that Trump should be removed from office, and the evangelical right bashed him. He's no longer the editor, by the way, and the evangelical bashed him. Why? Because look, they got their Supreme Court nominees that are going to go after abortion, that are going to and they literally equate the abortion issue with religious freedom issue. I mean, when I listen to these guys on there talking about how Trump's, Supreme Court nominees support religious freedom, no, they don't. They support Christian advancement, the advancement of Christendom. That's not religious freedom. It's actually the opposite of religious freedom. And again, pagans in the promised land. You want to talk about what the spread of Christendom does? It has nothing to do with religious freedom. It is the antithesis of religious freedom. All right, hey, we're going to take a break. We're at about in the hour. We'll come back and we'll wrap up the show with another half hour of your calls. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk.
Talk to somebody, let them know. Talk to your friends, let your feelings show. Even if it feels like there's nobody, don't let go. Sometimes it feels like the walls are closing in. Sometimes it feels like you'll never fit in. You know, lots of people love you. Don't let go. Even if you think no one cares about you, please remember there's something you can do. Not by yourself, I know that much is true. Reach out your hand, there'll be someone there for you. Just reach out. You try to be brave, pretend there's nothing wrong, but you need a little help, child, to make you feel strong. You know, lots of people love you, so don't let go. Lots of people love you. Don't let go. Lots of people love you. Don't let go.
All right, thanks for coming back. That's Murray Porter, and that's a song, Don't Let Go. It's a song that he wrote dedicated to people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts, and that's why he's saying don't let go. We come out of the holidays, and I played this song a few times over the last few days, even on New Year's Eve. I played it because, sometimes people don't have great times during the holidays. The holidays kind of brings out, even more of their loneliness and their depression. And, we had a native musician, Kelly Fraser, who was, she was Inuit. And she, like my friend Jeff Doreen, she used to incorporate her language, and she would actually cover a few popular songs in Inuit language. And she committed suicide on Christmas Eve. And she was only 26 years old. And I don't think people can appreciate how much, how for one thing, how high the suicide rate is amongst Native people. And the thing is, suicide used to be bigger amongst men. But USA Today did a study, and they determined that suicide against Native women has increased 139% in the last 10 years. 139%. And so now you've got the women are committing suicide as on the same rate as Native women are committing suicide at the same rate as Native men, and neither one of those rates are going down, and it is policy driven. So when I take a little bit of offense to somebody suggesting that identity politics, that I'm doing damage because I'm citing what these policy differences and why me as a Native person I oppose these policies. Or and the fact that some of these policies date back to the founding fathers of the United States, the ones who again lived in a time when slavery was not only legal but it was socially acceptable. Even there were people who opposed it then. Certainly the slaves did. I guarantee they did. So when I look at where we're at, and when I look at the circumstances that that a black man grows up in, and that a Native person, whether it's a black man in the city or a Native person on a reservation, these are circumstances that require identity politics. It requires that we not, and I don't mean alliances to be in the part of the U.S. political system, but to make a political stand against some of these things. And I feel strongly about that. All right, let me go ahead and get right back to the phone lines. We'll try to get as many in before we have to get out of here just before the top of the hour. So, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Mercedes calling from Brooklyn, New York.
Mercedes, thanks for calling and be a part of the show.
Okay, I just want to first thank you very much for having the boldness to speak the truth.
Thank you.
Secondly, you're not doing any damage. Jewish people, black folk, indigenous folk, we are primarily the ones who are always talking about racism, anti-Semitism. However, only the Jewish folk are given the right to express themselves, and no one calls into any radio program saying to them, listen, guys, you need to integrate. No, guys, you need to stop complaining about the Holocaust. No. Everyone gives them room to talk about it for as long as they want to and pay them also. But once someone from your group, the African descendants or any other group speaks about racism, bias treatment, everyone calls in to say you need to forget about it. So are we saying that what the Jewish people experienced was real trauma, but what we experienced really wasn't too bad? So we need to just take the Bible and read it and be okay with that. Why are they giving them a pass?
Well, the bottom line is this gets into some of the systemic nature of racism, and because Jewish people have a lot more control in media
Economic
and wealth
control
and politics and that kind of stuff, they their voice gets amplified. And I heard the governor of the state of New York and the mayor of the city of New York come right out because of the crimes that were committed against Jewish people. But these crimes, and in fact, some of the crimes committed against the people of color are by the very police force that operate underneath these political leaders. And so you're absolutely right. They get not only do they get more press and more support politically, they are never met with the same condemnation for identity politics that Native people and people of color are met with. So you're absolutely right. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. I am one of the senior citizens who was assaulted by a Jewish developer, physically assaulted. One of them, I never heard Mr. Adams or borough president and the governor and the mayor going out there to say, oh, no, this is an act of terrorism. These are our senior citizens. They are damaging their properties. I'm in court for 5 years. My kitchen is like a freezer. Who is talking about the terrorists who are damaging our properties? Okay.
Well, and I'll tell you the other thing, and again, this isn't just kind of an open condemnation to all people who are Jewish, but as a Native people, when we use words like the American genocide or the American Holocaust, we have been met directly. And look, there are many people that have been conditioned to think, no, if you use the word Holocaust in anything other than Jewish, that somehow you're undermining or you're denying, the Jewish Holocaust. And by no means. I just think that there are certain comparable issues associated. And in fact, in many ways, what Native people experience in terms of genocide, and I'm not diminishing slavery or any of that, but what Native people have experienced at the hands of country after country after country, generation after generation after generation, what Native people has been a 500-year genocide. No other people have experienced it in the same way. And again, with the exception of what black people have endured in terms of slavery, apartheid, colonialism, exploitation of resources, it's I think for anybody to say no, if you compare yourself to somebody else's atrocities, that you're denying theirs, I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it, and thanks for your support. All right, let me go back to the lines again. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, John. Dennis calling from Staten Island.
Hey, Dennis. Thanks for being a part of the show again.
Yes, I've been trying to get you since they went off the air and you came back on the air. I don't know if you're aware or if you covered the issue, but President Trump, the fellow I voted for, but that's aside, President Trump signed an executive order putting federal funding and resources into investigating and supporting tribal police in looking into the killing and the disappearance of Native American women, specifically for that. I don't know if you know that.
Yes, I do know, and let me tell you why it is really just a nothing thing. He put something like $1.5 million into 15 or 14 U.S. attorneys' offices, not police, U.S. attorneys. That's the equivalent of $100,000 into a U.S. attorney's office. And with those resources, that's not going to provide any additional security for Native people. I mean, in fact, I mean, it is really a token gesture at best, and frankly, it's insulting because you want to address some of this stuff. I mean, it's fine to do some big public proclamation, and I know you're always looking for some way to justify your vote for Trump. This isn't one of them. Trump has done more to hurt Native people with his commentary, with some of his policies, including advancing part of the problem that exists with Native people has been these man camps that get set up because of the exploitation of resources in the area. That's something that Trump's advocating for. So you want to do something to stop missing and murdered Indigenous women? Instead of putting $1 million in to bolster more of your Justice Department offices, which isn't going to do a damn thing, take a stand against the man camps where these women have been made missing and murdered and raped. That's
just make a point, though?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, the point is that you've been talking about it, and to be honest with you, I listen to the radio, I listen to television, and nobody else is talking about it except you. And when I see the President of the United States, minuscule or whatever you think of him or whatever, bringing attention to it with Native, American people that are suffering through this, and it's belittled. Somehow I think whatever the money was is not the point. The fact is that he's acknowledging it, and I didn't hear any other president, any other congressman, any other senator, or anybody else on the radio, even on BAI, bringing that up, except you and me now.
Well, I mean, there are plenty of other people who brought it up. There's a whole there's been a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was called on the Canadian side, nothing on the U.S. side. There are senators, there are congressmen, there have been previous presidents who brought it up, but most of them still do nothing to change the system, and that includes Donald Trump. Throwing money at a dozen Justice Department offices isn't going to address the problem. It isn't going to address the problem. It is a token gesture, and it is minuscule. And I will criticize it because for me, this is a PR stunt. And in fact, all of these presidential proclamations that are signed. And look, you can be excited about it all you want, but as a Native person, I know it's not going to do a damn thing to change the conditions that exist for Native women. And look, he'll get a few Native people to even pose for pictures and photo ops for him. The last president did that too. He used to every year he'd call some Native summit where he'd spend 15 minutes walking through a room and everybody get a chance to take a picture with Obama in front of the Christmas tree. Well, great. And millions of dollars were spent across Indian country so these so-called Native leaders could go there and get the picture taken with Barack Obama. And so just because Trump does the same thing and does a presidential proclamation, and I'll tell you, on a federal level, and $1.5 million is really a sneeze. Is really a sneeze. So
I respect your thoughts.
But no, and I appreciate you at least acknowledging it, and I'm glad you brought it up. I have talked about it on previous shows. I don't know if here in New York, but on my show back home, I did talk about it because the last month November was Native American Heritage Month. Trump deliberately never made a public proclamation about that. Yeah, you can find it on the website, on the White House website. But instead, he made a big proclamation out of celebrating November as Founding Fathers Month, which was really a slap in the face to Native people. So anybody who thinks that Donald Trump is doing something for Native people, you need to look at it in its totality, not just finding some token gesture that he did. So, but I appreciate it, and I know, Dennis, you probably struggle daily to come up with a reason to bolster or to give you justification for your vote, and I'm sorry you did what you did, but obviously it didn't matter. He didn't win New Jersey or New York or anything else, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Your vote was meaningless in that election anyway. But it puts you in a position where I think you're in a constant state of defending him, and that's kind of sad. But anyway, I appreciate the call. I appreciate you bringing up the issue. All right, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
It's Russell. I'm up in White Plains.
Hey, Russell, thanks for calling in and be a part of the show.
Sure. Dennis has to realize somebody put that in front of Trump, and he signed it. I didn't see Trump out over at Alcatraz Island. He's more concerned with removing EPA reviews of pipelines and other Native American people.
Absolutely.
Going through there. But, when you were speaking to Charlie, he accused you of saying all white people are bad. I heard him say that. And it's hard to have a discussion with somebody who's hearing only what they want to hear. And let me differentiate from Charlie, because I agree that identity politics can be divisive, obviously. I remember in '69 when Stonewall happened. I was young. I wasn't there. But I remember hearing that the blacks and the Puerto Ricans, everybody came down for these gay people. It was a coalition. And it's understood. Divided, we are conquered. And I'm personally, I got a problem with the transsexual movement, but these are things that we can handle internally. Right-wingers have consolidated. They don't care really how bad each other are. They are insular. They say hateful things, and they say we hate them because they know they do hateful things. Now, I'd like to just correct one thing about Mercedes. You didn't point out that she was expressing racial bias, okay?
Right.
I'm half Jewish. I understand. The difference with the anti-Semitism, it's used as an agenda to promote the Israeli state.
Right.
Okay? I'd like to say one thing about what just went on with that airplane. I think that it was shot down by Israelis as a way to precipitate a war. Of course, they're going to use a Russian missile. They're not going to use one of their own missiles. But I differentiate when people say that it's Jews that are doing this, okay? Every Christmas, Goyim attack the Jews. It happens every year. But this year, they emphasized it, and I think it was in service of this agenda and this a targeted assassination that has all the bloody fingerprints of the Israeli Mossad. And I thank you very much, John, for letting me express this.
Well, I appreciate the call, and and you're right. I think the idea that this word anti-Semitism, if you speak out against Israel, the first thing you get charged with is being charged with anti-Semitism. And look, I know, I'm not going to get the whole Jewish friend thing, like the black friend thing. I'm not going to do that. But I don't have a problem with somebody who has a different culture than me. The problem that I have with people who do things that I think are wrong. And when I look at the conflict and the settler mentality that Israel has towards Palestinian lands and the like, Gaza and others, I have a problem with that, and that's why I condemned the Iroquois Nationals going to play lacrosse in Israel. And look, I know some Native people didn't agree with me on that, but I'm gonna speak my mind on these subjects, but I appreciate that, and I think there is something really that smells rotten. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that Iran would have shot down that passenger plane, and Can I remind people that the last plane that was shot down, passenger plane in Iran? Do anybody remember that one? Ronald Reagan. 1988, I think it was. Yeah, I mean it was an Iranian airline, but it was a passenger plane that the United States shot down. They said they mistook it for a military plane,
for a Soviet plane,
and they shot it down. And they even though the UN openly condemned it, said no, this was completely the fault of the United States. The United States took the position, no, Iran's got to share part of the blame because they wouldn't answer the phone. Apparently, the fact that the U.S. military didn't even try to reach them on a commercial ban. Didn't even, was ignored. But Ronald Reagan paid out, I think, $63 million, I guess, in damages. But again, did the typical corporate jive and said, "But we accept no responsibility. We'll pay some money out, but we will accept no responsibility for it." And so, I mean, as soon as I saw this plane was shot down, I hearkened back to the plane that the United States shot down, and that they still, to this day, would never accept responsibility for. A good point. All right, let me go to so you can get a couple more callers in. Do we got anybody else online?
Yeah, we do.
All right, we'll go to another caller. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, John. Thank you so much. This is Will from Long Island.
Hey, Will. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, so I'm a brown guy, and I just love learning from you, and I look forward to listening to you every day because your perspective is just unbelievable. And I just want, I'm always thinking about you for some reason, and I had two things that, you learn in life, and, language is very important. And I just wanted your perspective on two things. The word, when the phrase Indian giver, and just to continue on the whole reparations thing, on how Israel got reparations from the Obama administration in 2015, and also when it first happened from France and Germany. And just wanted your perspective on that.
Well, the whole Indian giver thing is, I don't even know where its original, etymology comes from. But the suggestion is somehow that if a native person gives you something and they're going to take it back, I think somehow the roles got reversed there, because the reality is the United States has broken every treaty they ever signed. And in fact, they entered into treaties knowing that they would break them. Oftentimes, they would enter into a treaty with native people just to subdue them and to placate them for the moment. They throw some language in there. I mean, look, if you look at some of the language, one of the treaties that is often talked about from a Haudenosaunee standpoint is the Treaty of Canandaigua, which wasn't even properly ratified. But the language in there, the United States says they acknowledge that our land is ours, and that the U.S. will never claim the same nor disturb us in the free use and enjoyment of that land. And they say never. And of course, they say until we decide to sell it to them, which they claim to have the right to buy. And frankly, that's 1794. There is nothing that ever makes that treaty go away. And yet there's an assumption. I mean, I once called a congressman in Western New York, and I spent 45 minutes explaining, no, you're not my congressman. I live on native territory. You go, well, is the native territory in my district? No native territories are in your district. Our territories are not part of New York State. They aren't part of. I spent 45 minutes just trying to explain to the congressman, but what you do impacts me. So I want to talk to you about legislation that you signed, but it's not because I am part of your constituency. I am just a victim of your legislation. But I had to go through 45 minutes just through the gatekeepers before I could finally. And I did have a meeting, and we hashed out some things, and I thought it was productive. But just the lack of understanding that and the assumption. And we get into this a lot as Native people. Again, we're talking about identity politics. For me, I don't consider myself an American. I'm Gunyagahaga. I'm Mohawk, and that's what my identity is. And just because the United States says that I can be or declares that I'm a U.S. citizen, if that's not something that I choose to be, then it can't be imposed upon me. And so this is all ties to this whole notion. Gets a little bit back to the Indian givers thing. The whole idea that the United States will try to sugarcoat some language associated with some act that they do. I mean, it's like the caller Dennis calling it about Trump's executive proclamation, just throwing some money at U.S. attorneys' offices. Like somehow that's going to. I dare somebody to come up with numbers a year from now. How many of those U.S. attorney offices will have brought charges against somebody in association with missing or murdered Indigenous women? I guarantee there will be no uptick in it whatsoever. But well, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Let me try to get one more caller. Oh, no, that's it. All right, yeah, I see the clock now. All right, I got to get out of here. There's another show. Driving Forces comes in after us, so let me clear out of here. I'll be back next week. Hey, end of the month, January 30th, I'm showing a film downstairs, Indian Horse. It's a film on the residential school, so come out. Plan to come join me. It's a great film, powerful film. It'll move you. Please come out. That's January 30th at 7 p.m. downstairs at the Brooklyn Commons 388 Atlantic Avenue. I'll put together a cart and we'll have it run through WBAI. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk. Thanks for listening. Yahweh.